In the same way. Ladies and gentlemen, even though the current situation is serious, the company will not go to pieces because of it. On the contrary, we have a clear mission. We want to create a new, a better, a stronger Volkswagen, a company that successfully makes the transition to the new automotive world based on its innate strengths. A company that now unleashes new energy and leverages its enormous potential even more effectively. And not least, a company whose clear values form the basis for sustained success. Thank you very much for your attention for the time being. Mr. Pötsch and myself would be pleased now to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Müller. Thank you, Mr. Pötsch. I'd like to open it up for Q&A. Please wait for the microphone. First question, Mr. Krog, first row. Krog from Hamburg, Automobilwoche magazine. Mr. Müller, in the United States, there is still a diesel issue, and it seems to be particularly problematic in that particular market. Now, I'm sure you're not going to give us any details about the strategy 2025, but could you give us at least some indication? Can we expect that in the middle of last year, at the latest, you are going to focus on North America, or are you going to focus on other markets, for instance, the Asian markets? Follow-up question to you, Mr. Pötsch. Is the Supervisory Board still trying to find a replacement for Mr. Waaland, who did not take up his position as the designated head of the US business? And another question, on one of your slides it said that Oliver Blume is a guest, that's a quote, a guest in the group management board. Could I also be a guest? Of course, I'm just joking here. No, seriously. In den Aufsichtsrat berufen, so wie Herr Müller, als noch Porsche-Chef war, ja Anfang März dieses Jahres auch in den Konzern officially be made a member of the supervisory. Herzlichen Dank, interessante Anregungen.
Well, interesting questions here. Mr. Müller.
Well,
we're not going. You're talking about Mr. Blume, not Mr. Pötsch. I think you mixed that up, that last part of your question. But anyway, I understand your point.
Ist so. Es war ja lustig.
There was a comment off mic. I'd like to come back to the first part of your question. You mentioned the Americas region and the focus we're going to place on the American market. Now, Volkswagen is a global company. And I think you mentioned certain deficits when it comes to opening up certain markets. Well, we do have those deficits, and you mentioned two of them. I could also mention AGGC. We're not particularly successful there. So over the next few weeks and months, we're going to take an in-depth look at all those markets. We're going to ask which brands should be successful on what markets. And of course, Volkswagen plays, or for us, America plays an important role. North America, South America, and all those regions which are currently in political difficulties. I mentioned South America. This is also true for Russia, and this is also true for other regions such as Iran. And you also mentioned a personnel question, and also in connection with the United States. And I can say simply, yes. Of course, we were not happy that Mr. Waaland did not take up his job, and of course, we are trying to find somebody else to fill that position as quickly as possible.
Dann mache ich mit der Frage zu Herrn Blume weiter. Zunächst
question regarding Mr. Blume.
Ist es ein geeigneter Anlass, zu sagen, dass wir uns alle sehr freuen.
I'd like to take this opportunity to say that we are all very pleased that Mr. Blume was able to continue his career by acquiring the chairmanship at Porsche. Mr. Krug, you know that.
Some things are standard procedure, and some people attend meetings as guests initially, and when it turns out that they are mature enough, you take the next step. But there is really no reason to think about this at this point in time. Mr. Blume is looking back on a great career, and he's got a great career ahead. But I'm afraid journalists cannot take part in the group board meetings, I'm afraid.
Absolut richtig. So, wir machen hier vorne gerade
Okay, next question.
Wir gehen der Reihe nach durch.
Steve Fowler from Auto Express in the UK. Could you tell us and give us some details on what the effect on emissions, economy and performance will be of the software and hardware updates? Will your customers be better or worse off? And we've seen a very generous compensation package being offered to US customers. What sort of compensation package will be offered to customers in other territories?
Well, the first part of your question, you know, the thing is, we're offering solutions, technical solutions, that do not impact the performance of our cars. If they do, that impact will be marginal and negligible. We won't be able to feel it. Secondly, you mentioned some of the packages that we offer to our customers around the world. Now, it's important to emphasize that our customers are always at the focus of our attention, and we take care of all our customers. So we're working on an overall package for all affected markets and customers to make sure that this process is as pleasant as possible for the customers concerned. Also, it's important to emphasize that we are not going to charge our customers for what we need to do. We always said that, and that statement continues to be true. Okay, let's stay in the first row. Felix Frieler, DBA. I have a range of questions. I'd like to ask three of them. Number one, question to Mr. Pötsch. You've known the management board for many years. You now know the supervisory board. Looking back, as far as you're concerned, what mistakes were made by the supervisory board and the management board? Mistakes that caused this debacle. Second question for Mr. Müller. How have orders, not deliveries, how have orders developed across the various brands? Can you give us any figures? And question number three, I don't know who would like to take that one. A question regarding the costs for this emissions scandal. When will you reach critical mass? In other words, when will costs be so high that you have to take consequences, for instance, by selling off certain parts of the company? Any estimates? Mr. Pötsch, would you like to go first?
Also, zunächst mal zu der Frage, welche Fehler sind
First of all, the question as to what mistakes were made. I think it has become apparent, at least from what we know today, that we can assume that a relatively small group of people actually made mistakes, acted irresponsibly, there are no indications that the supervisory board or the management board was involved. And of course, there's one question we have to ask, and that question is, what can we do to make sure that this never happens again? But first of all, we have to wait and see what the results of the investigation are going to be. As I said, our internal audit department is focusing very closely on possible improvement in our processes. There's a question without a microphone, apparently. The answer by Mr. Pötsch. Well, I think we should wait and see. First of all, we need tangible investigation results. Your second question had to do with the number of incoming orders, and I'm talking about the first 11 months of this year. As far as I'm concerned, the figures are quite gratifying. If you look at the group as a whole, incoming orders are 3.5% up year on year. And as far as our budget is concerned, even up 4.2% on our budget. So we can be quite satisfied with the current situation. As for the third part of your question, the possible sale of assets, well, as I said before, and I'd like to emphasize that, there are no plans to sell any assets. We're a company with 12 very strong brands. We are happy to have those brands, and there are no plans to sell any one of them. In fact, there is no need to even think about this question. I know that some journalists disagree, but I cannot confirm their views. And I'm not going to speculate today and give you a figure about the possible damages we might have to pay. That remains to be seen. We just have to wait and see, and then take it one step at a time, react appropriately. But we are firmly convinced that our liquidity and our performance is strong enough, so strong that we don't have to even think about this question. Thank you. Moving on, in the first row.
Dominic Tobin from the Sunday Times. Could I ask how you came to understand how the defeat device software works? Did this come from individuals who coded the software, or have you had engineers combing millions of lines of software to discover exactly how this works? Secondly, could I also ask how Volkswagen will be going about reducing that discrepancy you mentioned between the emissions and the fuel economy in the real world and the test results?
Ja, Sie sprechen ein kompliziertes Thema an.
Well, what you're asking about is a complicated issue. We, our experts looked at the software. They analyzed all of the relevant functions that have been part of the software for more than 10 years. And this has been a very time-consuming process. We have made a lot of progress, but the process has not yet been completed. As you said, we're talking about millions of lines of code, and that code needs to be reviewed. As for those differences, well, first of all, we have to accept that they exist. And I think I said in my presentation that we're looking at different engine variants, 1.2, 1.62 liter versions across various generations over a period of 10 years, different versions in Europe and in the United States. And what this means is that we need different solutions for different engines and variants. Now, some variants can be fixed with a software update. In other cases, we might need a software package plus some additional hardware. I gave you an example, the 6-cylinder TDI, we're going to replace the catalytic converter. So in some cases, the measures we have to take are manageable, but hardware is more difficult. But as I said, all of these measures are currently being discussed with the US authorities, and as far as Europe is concerned, we know exactly what measures to take, and we're going to retrofit the affected vehicles in due course.
There's someone also in the second row, please.
Jürgen Gehmann, Norddeutscher
Jürgen
Rundfunk.
Gehmann from NDR.
Eine Frage zu Herrn Sanz. Sie haben gesagt, Sie haben sich mit
Question
der
on
Aufklärung
Mr.
der
Zanz. You
Thematik
said that
befasst. Da würde
to
mich
investigate the
interessieren,
diesel
warum Herr
issues,
Sanz und
you have appointed Mr.
war
Zanz. Why
diese
is it? Why is it
Personalie
him?
eventuell
Was
Wunsch
that
der
something that the majority
Mehrheitsaktionärsfamilien?
stakeholders had
Die zweite
wanted?
Frage
Right?
zu den
And the second
Arbeitsplätzen.
question
Können Sie
on
uns da
jobs.
sagen,
Can you say
in
anything
Bezug auf die Perspektive für
in
2016?
terms of the
Einerseits
2016
Leiharbeitnehmer, andererseits
decisions to
aber
be
auch
taken on
Stammbelegschaft.
temp staff and core workforce? Is there anything you would like to share with us? As far as your first question is concerned, and let me give you the background of that story here.
Den 20. September herum
Around the 20th of September, we were taken aback by the amount or the order of magnitude of the problems, and we had to establish a task force promptly which will and had to deal with the management of this crisis, and that was done with Mr. Gunninger, our chief counsel or legal counsel. And let me also say that this team has been working day in, day out, day and night in fact, and they've done an excellent job. But now we've come to a point where, let me be a bit colloquial by saying we see light at the end of the tunnel, right? And now we will invest more effort in managing this issue on a professional level. And a professional level presupposes that one of my colleagues on the board will be dealing with a top priority attitude, if you will. And as you've heard in my speech, we have been working a lot on realigning or reorienting this company, the group, and the structures, etc. So on the board level, we talked about the personalities of who could be in a position to head that process, who has the perseverance and the experience to carry this project forward, a very complicated and complex project. And this is how we agreed to appoint Mr. Garcia for the job. And this goes hand in hand with another professional appointment, which we have not mentioned, but has been, you probably have heard yesterday. Mr. Garcia transfers his responsibility to Mr. Brandstetter, the responsibilities for procurement, who will replace him on the procurement board member position. You also asked a question about our workforce in 2016. Let me reiterate what I said before. Job security, stable jobs is key, and this is true also as we speak. Temporary jobs are a tool of ensuring flexibility. Now that is not new, and if ever changes occur, changes to our production programs, then this can or may have an impact on the number of temporary workers.
So, dann sind wir jetzt.
Let me repeat what I said before. On the group board level, every Tuesday we looked into this problem of crisis management and how we move this whole process forward. So it's an ongoing dialogue, and it has been a unanimous decision by the group board to appoint this person. Let's go to the third row. Mr. Doll, Mr. Fromm, Mr. Murphy.
Doll, Die Welt. Eine Frage
Doll
an
from
Herrn
Die
Pötsch.
Welt. Question for Mr. Pötsch.
Herr Pötsch, Sie hatten von einer Kultur
Mr.
des
Pötsch, you
Akzeptierens von Fehlverhalten gesprochen.
about the
Sie haben uns
culture of
außerdem gesagt, dass es
accepting
zum Beispiel in
faults or
wichtigen Bereichen
mistakes,
wie der
and in many
Motorenentwicklung kein
areas like
Vier-Augen-Prinzip gab.
engine development, there
dass
was
die
no
IT
two-man
zur
rule,
Kontrolle solcher
and
Prozesse
the
veraltet
idea
ist.
to establish control over such processes has been obsolete. Now, for a company that has been a benchmark of the industry in many areas, that was astounding, wasn't it? So couldn't you also look at entirely different areas within Volkswagen where also there have been violations, possibly infringements of applicable laws? So we're not just talking about emissions, but other things, because the industry is heavily regulated. There may have been infringements elsewhere.
Also, zunächst mal die
Now,
Zitate
first of all,
wiedergegeben.
you have quoted me correctly,
Im Bereich der Motorenentwicklung
and when it
sind
comes to engine
Defizite
development,
festgestellt
yes, we have identified
worden im Rahmen der
deficits
Untersuchungen,
as
insbesondere
part of our
aufgrund
investigation,
von den Revisions,
and also after what
Aktivitäten.
our internal
Es
auditors
ist überhaupt
have
keine Frage, dass
ascertained.
wir,
There's no question
die ganze
whatsoever
Situation zum Anlass
that
nehmen,
this has been a situation for us
in
to
erheblichen
look
Breite
very
zu
closely now and
Und das
investigate
führt
on a,
wiederum auch
well, if you will, broad base. What does that
dass,
mean? It means
dort beispielsweise eben erhebliches Datenvolumen
that
aufläuft.
we collect a large amount of data now. Data volumes are extremely comprehensive, and which will obviously delay our processes a little further, or our investigation work. In other words, it requires a lot of time. But we do not want to select and pick out a few problems, but really we would like to be as broad-based as we can.
Das nochmal in eine realistische Betrachtung
Now, to
bringen.
put that into
Wir müssen
perspective,
natürlich, weil die Kapazitäten, um solche Untersuchungen durchzuführen,
because the capacities to conduct those investigations is not endless.
da einen Zeitplan
And therefore,
aufsetzen,
we
in
have to
dem wir
establish a
Schritt für
time
Schritt,
frame or time
relevante
schedule
Bereiche
which
untersuchen
identifies
werden.
step by step
wird also
the
natürlich
areas
von
that are
in
relevant
die
and
Jahre
that we are
16,
going
17
to scrutinize even
reichen,
further.
nur mal
That will
Zahlen
reach
zu
into
sagen.
2016
Können
and
Sie sich vorstellen,
2017, of course. Now you can
dass,
imagine, just to give you a
im Bereich
number,
der Revisions-
that when it comes to
Tätigkeit
auditing
mehr
activities,
als 1000
more than
Prüfungen,
1,000
geplant sind für
audits
das
have
Jahr
already been planned for 2016.
Dankeschön. Dann gehen wir mit dem Mikrofon
Thank you.
wieder zurück.
Let's move the mic back, please, to Mr. Fromm.
Herr Fromm, Süddeutsche
Mr.
Zeitung.
Fromm from Süddeutsche
Herr Müller,
Zeitung.
Sie waren in diesen
Mr.
Tagen
Müller,
bei einem Ihrer
these days
Großaktionäre
you've
in
just
Katar.
visited
Da gab es
one of their
diese
large
Begleitmusik zu diesem Besuch,
shareholders
dass
in
der Aktionär
Qatar,
nicht ganz so glücklich
and
sei
there was some background
mit der
talk
Art und
about
Weise,
the
wie
shareholder not
VW
being entirely happy about the
strukturiert ist,
way
und es auch wohl offensichtlich
Volkswagen
über das
has been
Thema
structured, talk
Können Sie
about
uns ein bisschen
employee
erzählen, ob das
participation, I
stimmt?
think, or
Hat
labor
man da
union
wirklich Probleme
co-determination.
mit
Is
der
that right?
Konzernkultur?
Do they have a
Und worum
problem
ging's da
with corporate
in Katar?
culture? And what was it that you
Zweite
discussed with your
Frage,
shareholders in Qatar?
Herrn Pötsch,
Question
Sie
number two
bekommen
for Mr.
einen neuen
Pötsch.
Vorstand,
You'll have a
die
new
erste Frau im
board
Konzern
member,
im
the
Januar, der Name ist
first
vorhin auch schon gefallen.
lady to sit on your
Was
board,
ist
and the
so,
name
was
has
sind so
been
Ihre
given to you,
Erwartungen
given to us
an
before.
Frau
What's your
Mann-Denhardt?
expectations that
Was
you have
soll
from
sie
Ms.
leisten?
Mann-Denhardt? What
Was
is
erwarten
she
Sie im
supposed to
kommenden
do? What do you
Jahr von
expect
ihr,
in this coming
insbesondere auf
year?
das, was ja auch im
Especially
kommenden Jahr in den USA zu
as it
erwarten ist?
relates to what we can
Es scheint
expect
ja
in the
so zu sein,
United
dass
States
dort,
next year. So it
so
seems,
die
I
größten
think, that
Fragestellungen lauern,
the biggest
die auf Sie zukommen.
issues are
Und
still
noch eine kurze
looming there in the
Nachfrage zum
background.
Thema Verkäufe,
And
Nichtverkäufe,
finally,
Herr Müller.
sales or
Sie haben
non-sales,
gerade
Mr.
gesagt,
Müller.
Sie
You
haben
just said
12 Marken,
earlier
Sie sind
that you have
glücklich damit,
12
Sie rechnen auch
brands,
nicht
you're
damit, dass
happy,
Sie
and you do not
Notverkäufe
expect
machen müssen.
that you have to
Aber man hatte schon
divest
den Eindruck in
anything.
den
But
vergangenen Wochen, dass
we
es
had the
so
impression over the
Teile
last
gibt
couple
in diesem
of weeks that there are
12-Marken-Konzern,
still
die
parts within
sakrosantner
that
sind als
12
andere. Ist das
brand
so, oder
group
sind
that
Ihnen
are
alle
more
Kinder gleich
sacrosanct than
lieb?
others? Or do you think all the kids are as endearing to you as all of them? Well, Mr. Fromm, we've been known each other for quite a while, so I can be a bit cheeky here. I, every morning, read what you write and what Mr. Doll writes and your colleagues, just to get a gist, an understanding of what is happening apparently within the Volkswagen Group. And it was with great interest also that I read that we have been quoted to appear in Qatar, where we have been given a piece of their mind, or being scolded at. You know, sometimes it's a far-fetch. It's true, yes, I was in Qatar in order to present myself in my new function, in my new capacity, to the gentlemen there. And of course, it's quite normal that we discussed the current situation with them, because they're very much interested in that. They want to know how we deal with this type of crisis and what are we planning to do going forward. Now, all I can tell you at this point is that the talks that we've had with our Qatari shareholders were with were based on a consensus and our broad-based confidence that we share efforts and that we share the view that our cooperation in the future will be intensified rather than be questioned in any way. Now, coming back to your third question, and this is also something I just only read in the newspapers, that there are some parts of the company that are more sacrosanct than others. Now, I'm amazed to hear that. Where did you pick that information from? It doesn't certainly come from me, but it's nice for you to ask, so it gives me a chance to answer. And let me echo what I said earlier. It's not a second we possibly think about getting rid of any of those parts of this great company, which have made that group so strong, which until the 20th or the 18th of September, it was an outstanding group, also in your eyes, mind you. This has not changed, and this company is so great precisely because we have those 12 brands in our portfolio, and all of them individually are successful. So it is a successful group of a number of component parts that temporarily is in problems or is facing problems, but we are convinced that with the reforms that it takes and the personnel changes that we've made, we've already set the course for a better future. As Ms. Hohmann-Dennert is concerned, well, we're really glad it has been possible to get a professional for legal matters and integrity. On the 1st of January 2016, she'll resume her office. And basically, we're actually throwing a bridge to what we said earlier. Because when we say that we are investigating, we're clarifying things, we're looking into what has happened and why it has happened, how did people behave, etc. Now, all of that can be addressed from a different point of view or from a different angle. I.e., I think this is one of the main areas of expertise for Ms. Hohmann-Dennert. Bring integrity into this company and establish a broad-based understanding. And she certainly doesn't start from scratch in the organization, but from what we have learned now, it's a good starting point for her job. Secondly, it's no question whatsoever that we will be facing litigation in the United States. Ms. Hohmann-Dennert has worked for another company in the past and has made an important contribution to organize these processes, let me put it like that. And I'm confident she will do that also in her function within our company to, in other words, establish a dialogue and a collaborative interaction with the authorities in a fruitful and appropriate way. Okay, let's continue with Ms. Wissenbach. Ms. Wissenbach, please.
Wissenbach von Reuters.
Wissenbach, Reuters.
Ich hätte noch mal Fragen zu den Rückstellungen.
Can I follow up on the contingencies, Mr. Percher, for the legal action, ensuing legal action? Is there anything?
Konkrete Rückstellungen vornehmen
Is there any material reserves that you're going to make for these impending trials, possibly legal action, like SE? Because it's not about the assumption of innocence at this point. And if so, if you make additional contingencies, when would that happen? And then another question for Mr. Müller. So far, you have not traveled to the United States to face the public there. Are you planning to do that, to be at the motor show in Detroit, to stand on your knees in front of the public?
Ja, vielleicht nehme ich den Punkt, weil Sie mich angesprochen haben.
Let me take that first one, because you asked me directly.
Bis dato für juristische Auseinandersetzungen
So far, we have not created any reserves or contingencies for any litigation on our balance sheet. Now, for you to imagine how this technically works, I think we've established a stringent process where all areas affected will be constantly monitoring whether there is a potential threat of litigation, because you cannot just create any random contingencies on your balance sheet. You can't. You just first have to check in your different departments, is there a relative risk of any such threat cropping up, and therefore, because there was no such risk in the past, no contingencies have been made. However, these cannot be ruled out going forward. The fact of the matter is that in the United States, the situation we're facing is that representatives of our group have admitted that we have engaged in wrongdoing and that illegal devices are installed in our vehicles, unlawful devices. And that already paves the way, if you will, for legal action. And we are monitoring that on an ongoing basis, and we could expect that at some point in time that will lead to a balance sheet item to reflect that legal risk. At the moment, it's premature to say that, whether that will be on our annual accounts or not. And you asked me the question of how about planning a visit to the United States. You're right. So far, in my capacity as chairman of the board, I have not yet been to the United States. And at the moment, there has been no occasion, really, because as I said earlier, first of all, we are negotiating on the technical solutions with the EPA and CARB. And for those meetings, we have appointed the best possible delegations of people of Volkswagen and Audi on the ground. And next week also more talks will be held. Now, once the conditions are there to engage in further talks beyond that, and we believe that this will be during the days after the Detroit Motor Show, then I will be scheduling a visit to America. Now, whether I'll be kneeling down or not, well, not for me to say at this point. I think I'll be self-confident in in the way that I meet people there, and I, of course, will apologize for things that have occurred, but I'll be optimistic and quite confident looking into the future, because let me echo what I said before. Mistakes have happened. We will make sure that they'll be investigated. We will make sure it will never happen again. And Volkswagen also will be realigned to be prepared for that new and successful future, including in the United States. Okay, we stay in the same row.
Jenny Hill, BBC News, with a question for Herr Müller. Herr Müller, what are you going to do for the European customers who fear they're now stuck with a vehicle whose resale value is significantly lower than it was? Will you be compensating them?
Well, you're asking about the resale value of our cars, and of course we are looking into this issue. I think in my presentation I said that we're going to prepare the right package for each market, for all regions, and that obviously also includes the UK. Of course, it's got to be an attractive package, some form of, well, let's call it compensation for a reduction in the residual value of a car. Yes. Moving on to the other side of the room, Mr. Kraut.
Volker Kraut, Autozeitung. Meine Frage richtet sich an Herrn Müller.
Question to Mr.
Herr
Müller.
Müller, haben Sie denn schon unter dem Aspekt möglicher Kosteneinsparungen ein abschließendes Bild, welche Modelle zukünftig noch wirtschaftlich abbildbar sind, gemacht?
Which models are still viable going forward? We know that the Phaeton has been eliminated. You're not going to launch another Roadster. Will there be further models? The future of the Beetle, of the Chiron? Are you thinking about the future of those vehicles? And another question regarding your brand, but I'm not asking whether you're going to sell that brand. I'm talking about the Bugatti brand. Is it still the right brand for Volkswagen from modesty quality perspective, and also considering that, as far as I know, this brand has always had deficits. Your focus is going to be on electric motoring, so I think Bugatti is not going to be the spearhead. The 918 Porsche Spider, I think, is a much better example. Well, thank you, Mr. Gort, for this very important question. The first is more important than the second. It keeps us busier, I have to admit that. Of course, we have to review the model lineup of the Volkswagen Group, but it doesn't make sense to pick out individual models. What you have to do is you have to look at the whole situation, the overall picture, and ask, how is the automotive world developing as a whole? Drive systems are an important question here. Secondly, the question is, how are we going to position our brands around the world, in the various regions of the world? And the third question is, what is the right product lineup at what point in time? Now, this is, as you can imagine, a relatively complex task. Over the past 10 weeks since I became the company's CEO, we didn't really have time to address those questions, and I told you that we needed to bring the right people on board, but now we have them. The right people are now on board, and in the first quarter they are going to address exactly this question, and the results will be the basis for planning round 65 and also the basis for our 2025 strategy. So give us another 3 months, and then I'm sure we can get back to you with answers in the second quarter. As for Bugatti, well, you're taking me by my word. You mentioned modesty. When I said modesty, we've got to be modest. I was referring to our behavior. And there are customers in the world, very few customers I know, but some of our customers have the necessary wherewithals to buy those cars, and they want to buy them, so why not sell them to them? We've got the successor to the Veyron. It's ready, and in spite of all the prophecies of doom, we're going to unveil it at the Geneva Motor Show. Demand for this car is surprisingly high, as far as I'm concerned, and I can assure you the second generation is not running up deficits, so I have a clear conscience, I sleep very well, but you are right, we have to review brands such as Bugatti. Or let me rephrase that. We have to ask about the products and which products will be profitable for those brands going forward. Let's go back to the first row.
Ja, Ralf Krüger, Deutsche Presseagentur.
Ralf Krüger, Deutsche Presse Agency. A question to Mr. Müller. Earlier on, you said that the group is facing enormous costs. You don't really know how high those costs are going to be. What does this mean for your suppliers? Are you going to ask them to lower their prices, put pressure on them? Second question, the damaged image of the diesel engine. Do diesel engines still have a future going forward, seeing as their image has been tainted? And what about orders? You asked that question partly before. You said that the incoming orders are positive, but how did incoming orders change starting in the month of October? Right, your first question, costs and our suppliers. Our purchasing chain is up and running. It works well, and it's not going to talk to our suppliers and mention the diesel issue and ask them to lower their prices. This is certainly not our style. Then the image of diesel engines, yes, this image has been tainted, you are right. We, Volkswagen, but also our competitors desperately need diesel engines in order to meet CO2 requirements in 2020. Now, you know that electric motoring is not quite as popular as anticipated or hoped for in Germany, even though the Volkswagen Group, among others, is offering a wide range of electric vehicles. So we're going to have to work on that, all of that, and the German VDA Association and also the ACEA Association is lending its support. It was a big issue last week in the board. We're going to launch a pro-diesel image campaign, and there is no reason whatsoever to make diesels, these high-tech products, seem bad if the NOx emissions are okay. And they are okay for the EU6 diesels. We're talking about different regulations in the United States, different regulations in Europe, and the engines, which of course the problems are in some cases 10 years old. So I think if we all pull together, it should be possible for us to improve the image of diesel engines and to optimize them further. Diesels and petrol units alike, internal combustion engines in general, to close this gap between conventional drive systems and electrical systems. We've got to bridge and close this gap. And your third question referred to the incoming orders in the last month, the month of November. November saw very good incoming orders. This might partly be due to the fact that China is recovering, so we seem to be able to compensate some negative effects. In Germany, the Volkswagen Group is doing extremely well. There are countries such as Spain and France in Europe, which are seeing a decline in the number of incoming orders, but we are confident that this reluctance is going to change over the next few weeks. Moving on, next question in the first row, somewhere in the middle.
Nancy Holgrave from CNBC. Mr. Mueller, you've talked a lot about the complexities of finding a fix in the United States, but I'm wondering if you can give us specifically more details here on what's preventing U.S. officials from giving your fix the green light, because we know a proposal was presented on November 20th, yet no agreement yet. And can you say in complete confidence that a technical solution will be reached that is not cost prohibitive? And then just building on that, the longer it takes, the more hardship it's causing for your dealer network in the United States as well. So are you prepared to offer them more assistance, whether it's in the form of incentives or some financial aid?
Well, I know this has been a problem. We are impatient, we'd like to speed up the process, but we can't tell CARB and EPA when to set their deadlines, when to complete their analyses and come to an agreement with us. We are doing everything we can to make sure that we can complete this process as soon as possible, but I can't give you any more information, and I don't want to speculate, really. I can only say that we work extremely well with those two authorities, and over the next few days, at the latest over the next few weeks, I'm sure we'll have an agreement in place, and that will then be turned into a recall. I'm sorry, I can't give you any more details. Moving on to the other side of the room.
Hallo, Ingrid Hägermann von der Neuen Presse.
Ingrid Hägermann, Neue Presse. Question to Mr. Pötsch. You said there are no indications that Supervisory Board and Management Board members were involved. Does this also apply to Supervisory and Management Board members that were on the boards 10 years ago or over the past 10 years? And a question regarding the future positioning. You're trying to raise synergies. Where are they supposed to come from? I mean, you're using your modular toolkits. What other potential is there? And centrality and synergies, are these not mutually are these not contradictory? Don't you think? Well, who is or was involved where and when? Let me say this again. We are conducting an extensive investigation. We're also looking at the history of the company. We're going back. We want to know exactly who is and was responsible for what at what point in time. So please ask that question again 1 month from now, once our investigation has been completed. And then we will let you know who was responsible for what. I think I have to answer the second part of the question. The new strategic positioning and the contradiction between centralization on the one hand and synergies on the other. I don't think that there is a contradiction. I think you can do both. Decentralization essentially means empowering the brands in terms of their day-to-day operations. However, that does not mean that you can't get together and plan the long-term future of the group. That's one way to raise synergies. Mr. Kort mentioned one example, and that is the product lineup for the next 10, 15 years, and the right drive systems for that lineup. Once we have that, we can decide who is going to do what. You said yourself that our modular toolkits are doing well, but that doesn't mean that everything is set in stone for the next 10 years. We are reviewing things, we have to develop them further, and we are confident that we can raise further synergies.
Ja,
Mr. Hapke,
NDR Fernsehen.
From NDR Television.
Zwei Detailfragen zunächst an
Two
Herrn
detailed
Pötsch.
questions to Mr. Pötsch.
Wir haben ja nun einerseits gesagt, Namen können
On the
Sie
one
noch
hand,
nicht
you
nennen.
said you
Andererseits
can't
haben
give
Sie
us any
deutlich
names.
gemacht, dass der bisherige
On the other hand,
Erkenntnisstand ist, es ist eine
you said
kleinere Gruppe von
that
Ingenieuren im
apparently
Unternehmen.
only a small
In welchem
group of engineers
Unternehmensbereich
was
wusste
involved.
man denn Bescheid, denn die
Which
Fortentwicklung
area
dieser
of
Schummelsoftware,
the
das haben
company
Sie ja auch
knew
dargestellt, war
about this cheating
systematisch. Also ist
software
da der Bereich
systematically?
Motorenentwicklung der
Is it
Kenntnisträger?
engines
Ist der
development?
Bereich
Is
Dieselmotorenentwicklung
it
der
diesel engines development
Kenntnisträger?
specifically?
Wie kann man den Unternehmensbereich beschreiben, in dem man Bescheid
Which
wusste?
area in the company
Zweite
knew about what was going
Es
on?
ist ja offenbar so gewesen,
Second
dass bei der
question,
Entscheidung, diesen Dieselmotor für die USA zu
it was
entwickeln, von
decided to
vornherein
develop a
klar
diesel
war, dass man
engine
dieses
for the
nur
US
erreichen
market.
würde, die
And I think
Einhaltung
right
der
from the
strengen
beginning,
Grenzwerte in den
it
USA,
must have been clear
wenn man
that
das
the US rules and regulations could only be complied with if you use the SCR catalytic converter in connection with AdBlue. Have you found out when this decision was taken, by which body? The decision to do it without any SCR catalytic converter and without any NOx trap. After all, this is an ambitious, or was an ambitious target. You said you knew at the time it's difficult to achieve it. And question to Mr. Müller. A question regarding your task as you see it. You said you would like to focus more on the company's strategy. Now, this company is developing engines, and apparently at the time it was known that it was not possible to develop an engine on time, an engine that complies with the necessary rules and regulations. Is that a piece of information that you would like to be informed about going forward?
Gut, zum Auftakt.
Now, first of all, we're talking here about engines or engine issues that are related to engine development, where we attach great importance to scrutinizing those departments, i.e. those technical functions that have developed engines, right? I mean, that is a proviso, and can I ask you for your understanding at this point that we would like to continue this type of investigation, and then once we have results, we will present them in one go, as it were, and then we'll also make a separate statement about them. And that, in fact, is also true for the different committees that will have to deal with it and have possibly dealt with that in the past. So basically it goes back to the question of who is in charge of what, and we'd let you know in due course. Point number two, or second part of your question, you called me a strategist. Well, I'm not sure I'm a strategist, I mean it's for you to say, but
Ich stelle mir schon ein Unternehmen vor,
I would
wo so ein Sachverhalt in Zukunft nicht mehr auftreten
imagine to see a company here where in the future no such things can happen again, where we have an end-to-end information flow which is well organized,
primär nicht Suche nach den Schuldigen
where
geht, sondern
in the future we will not only apportion blame and find the culprits, but rather jointly look for the best solution. And I think here comes what is really important, that information, when we get it, must not be just a one-off publication that trickles down somewhere and then disappears from there, but any information we find, any information we yield from this analysis must also be established on hierarchies that normally do not deal with those questions, right? So everyone in this organization must be in a position to analyze the gravity of a problem. I don't know if that's understandable, how I phrased this issue. As a member of the Board of Management, you get dozens and millions of emails every day. And obviously this raises our awareness to what is really at stake. But there are some things that you don't have the time to read, and you do not get the gist of it even, because there's too much information and it's not structured and addressed to those people who should know. And this is why we're ever so astounded why this has happened. Why could something like that have happened? Apparently because information was not shared, it stayed within a small circle of people or engineers, and we have now stepped up this investigative effort. Today, to this very date, we have to say that in that, call it the triangle, the Bermuda Triangle, something may have happened within that smaller scale. Now, I know you'll be angry at me when I'm telling you that we only have time for 2 questions now. We have to start in the middle, in the front, because we had an earlier question. Then comes Mr. Murphy, please.
Hallo. Ich hätte 2 Fragen, und zwar zum einen,
Well, 2 questions, please.
Sie haben ja einige Veränderungen
For one,
unterhalb
you
des Vorstandes
also have made some changes already below the board level, strategy and digitalization. And do you to take any additional steps in terms of digital transformations or any changes to that team, to the digital team? And you also said you have been done excellent progress with the collaboration of the US authorities. That apparently has not always been the case in the past. So how has that good cooperation been borne out, come to fruition? And when you go to the US, do you travel to the Detroit Motor Show, or will you be later there after the show? Can you clarify that again? Well, I said I'm going to Detroit. That's what I said. And as far as I know today, from Tuesday to Friday, I will be traveling the United States during that time and meet the authorities there. Number 2, or it rather was your first question, what should the design and structure of my function be, or of our departments related to my function? So that restructuring has been largely finished. I have to reappoint one more position, which is quality assurance, but all the other job positions have now been filled. Also, marketing and sales, production, those have been filled now. And the same is also true for the product and the modular strategy, which means that after the 4th of January, we're fully operational. And there, I'm quite confident to say that I found a team there that is really top flight. And therefore, it is true, I hope, that we will do an excellent job. What was the second part of your question again? Can I ask you? Collaboration with the United States? Well, you know, if there's 2 that don't get on with each other, that's because either of them are to blame. There may be misunderstandings, there may be incorrect interpretation of information, be it as it may. I do understand that the American authorities were a bit disappointed or cross at what we did, because they believed they had given the right information, which they have indeed shared with us, and then it takes me back to what I said earlier. For some reason, in Germany and in our company, apparently that information hasn't arrived in the place that it should have arrived, or it has not been interpreted the way that the Americans have meant it to be interpreted. Now, fortunately, that has been solved now. We're in a very factual and collaborative mode of engagement, which had been the case in the past, in fact. So this already now is a good condition, a good prerequisite for our ongoing discussions and also finding an agreement that will help us to know how we're going to develop in the future. And hopefully also we want to establish and to continue to offer the diesel engine as a successful product in the United States. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Müller, Mr. Pötsch. Unfortunately, I'll have to end this press conference now. It's too bad, says Mr. Müller. Not because I want to annoy you in any kind of way, but we have more appointments later on today. And also, finally, we talked about Detroit a number of times. On the traditional group night on Sunday, we will be available for your questions in Detroit and also in the following weeks as well. For the time being, thank you very much for taking the time to travel to Wolfsburg, and I'll be looking forward to meeting you again to discuss those issues going forward. Thank you very much indeed.